Namaskar. On behalf of Speakmaker IIT Hyderabad and Irshad, the Speaking Arts Club of IIT Hyderabad, I welcome you all to this virtual talk by Padma Vibhushan Dr. Karan Singh ji. We are honored to have him with us today. First, I'd like to introduce you all to Speakmaker. Speakmaker, Society for Promotion of Indian Classical Music and Culture Among Youth, is a non-profit voluntary movement with its primary objective to expose today's students and young people to the beauty, grace, and wisdom embodied in age-old Indian art forms and its heritage. Speak McKay regularly organizes events in which some of the greatest living exponents of Indian art forms travel to schools and colleges throughout the world, demonstrating and teaching about the many facets of Indian culture and heritage. Started in 1977, this movement has now spread across the length and breadth of globe with more than 400 chapters in various countries, cities, and towns. Since its inception in 1986, the Hyderabad chapter of Speak Mackay is one of the most active groups. The IIT Hyderabad subchapter, which is just 7 years old, has been actively organizing concerts, performances, hosting prominent artists such as Dr. Uh, Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia ji, Shri Vishwamohan Bhatt, and Shri K. Vishwanath Guru, among others. Student volunteers act as foot soldiers of organizing team, which is supervised by faculty members. Today we bring you the first event of this year. Uh, Padma Vibhushan Dr. Karan Singh ji is a multifaceted personality. He is an eminent scholar, educationist, poet, a lover of art and culture, and an author of over 20 books on various topics. Today, he is going to enlighten us on the role of poetry in Indian history, its role in current generation, also the relevance of Indian heritage to our generation. We are also honored to have with us our own director, Professor B.S. Murthy, Mrs. Murthy, Dr. Rachna Prasad ji, Lakshmi ji, and our faculty coordinators, Professor Maladi and Shivaji sir. Now I invite my friend and co-host Vedika to introduce our guest. Vedika, please.
Yeah, am I audible, Shreya?
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you, Shreya. Our guest for today, Dr. Karan Singh ji, was born the Yuvraj of Jammu and Kashmir to Maharaja Hari Singh and Maharani Tara Devi. He has had a brilliant educational career in the Doon School, Jammu and Kashmir University, and Delhi University, where he created a university record in ME Political Science. He then went on to do a PhD on the political thought of Sri Aurobindo. Karan Singh ji joined the Union Cabinet of Srimati Indira Gandhi in 1967 at the age of 36, becoming the youngest person to be appointed a cabinet minister. During his 10 years in the administration, he headed the ministries of tourism and civil aviation, health and family planning, and education and culture. He was elected to the Lok Sabha from the Udhampur constituency in Jammu and Kashmir. Later on, he also served as a member of the Rajya Sabha. In 1989, he was appointed ambassador to the United States and for 8 years was India's member on the UNESCO governing board. He chaired the Auroville Foundation for 20 years and served as the Chancellor of the Jammu and Kashmir University, JNU, and the Banaras Hindu University. He served as the President of the Indian Council for Cultural Relations and is the current chairman of the National Advisory Board of SPICMACE. Apart from this, Karan Singh ji is a philanthropist, an excellent orator, and a poet who has recited many devotional songs in his mother tongue, Dogri. Sir, we welcome you once again. I now hand over the proceedings to Dr. Karan Singh and invite him to begin the talk. Sir.
Thank you for that very generous introduction. Professor D.S. Murthy, Director, and all the rest of you associated with the IIT Hyderabad. It is a great pleasure to revisit Hyderabad, which I have done on many occasions in the past. But this time, the virtual visit has a very special ambience, as it were. Now, you have given me a very interesting uh, topic, the relevance of the Indian heritage for the current generation. I mean, for heaven's sake, what does that mean? Our heritage is so rich and so vast. Which heritage do you want me to talk about? Shall I talk about the heritage of philosophy, of music, of dance, of sculpture, of architecture, of town planning, of astronomy, of metallurgy, of medicine? I mean, what area is there in which the Indian heritage is not rich and full of lessons for us? So what I've done is I've chosen first, and then you've added also you've thrown in emphasis on the role of poetry. It's a very strange mixture of things that you've done. Usually you have a certain topic you can concentrate on. So what I'm going to do is I'll tell you. I was wondering how I should play it. I'm going to talk first our, about education, because this is an educational institution. And I'll try and link our educational structure to our heritage. When I've gone through that, then I'll turn to the poetry. So that is a different world, a different topic. But before I do any of these things, I want to pay my homage to Stick McKay, with which I've been associated for many decades, and to Kiran Seth. It's remarkable that the imagination of one man has now grown into a pandemic, shall we say, of education. It's not just one place, all over the globe now. They've done splendid work, taking the great artists right down to the colleges and the educational institutions, where people would never have the opportunity to listen to people like Shiv Kumar Sharma on the santoor, Zakir Hussain on the tabla, or Ustad Amjad Ali Khan on the sarod, or Kishori Amankar with the books. I mean, all of these are legendary figures. And normally, students would never have the opportunity to listen to them. But Spick McKay has done that and is doing that. It's a privilege for me to chair the National Advisory Board. And therefore, at the outset, I would like to pay my homage to this institution and to the founder of the institution. Now, as far as education is concerned, let me just tell you briefly. UNESCO set up a commission for education in the 21st century. There were 15 of us in our personal capacities. And it's a very good report. I still feel it is useful for you to read that report. It should be in your library. It was presented in 1996, I think, or 1997, but it's still valid. Now, in that report, we did a lot of things. We emphasized lifelong learning, we emphasized teacher upgradation, and so on. But we as it were, formulated what we called the 4 pillars of learning. And those 4 pillars I'm going to share with you today. There's some strange voices coming in. Share, share, share voices coming in.
I request the organizers to mute everyone else. Please
Some
do
ghost
that.
voices are coming in from somewhere.
I'm sorry, sir. Somebody should mute. There is one Sushmita who is on.
It happens all the time.
Sorry, sir.
No, we've identified 4 pillars of learning. I'd like you to listen closely to them. The first is learning to know, the Jnana Yoga. Ano Bhadra Kitavo Yantu Vishwataha. Let noble thoughts come to us from every side. Learning to know has been the foundation of the Indian heritage. Our great masterworks are the Upanishads. They are the high watermark of world philosophy. And what are they? They are questions and answers. Please remember, ours is a dialogical civilization. Unlike the Semitic civilizations that are revelatory civilizations. There's a text there, you can take it or leave it. Our civilization has grown out of questions and answers. If you read the Upanishads, they're all questions, very intelligent questions. Kasminno bhagavo vidyate sarvamidam vidyatam bhavati. What a question. Shaunaka, the great householder, goes to Angiras, the rishi, and asks him, Kasminno bhagavo vidyate sarvam vidyatam bhavati. What is that by knowing which everything becomes known? What a lovely question. So these are the sort of questions, or the Shweta, why are we here? What impels us to move? Why does our heart move? What is our purpose in life? Where do we go from here? Where do we come from? These sort of questions were the basis of our heritage. So in the Indian heritage, as far as learning to know is concerned, the question and answer is very important. The Upanishads are dialogues. The Gita is a dialogue. Lord Buddha dialogued with his disciples for 40 years. Lord Mahavira did the same. So the Indic religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, they are dialogic religions, and therefore learning to know, which we had laid down in our report, is learning to get vidya from wherever it comes. We have never been exclusive. As I said, Anu Bhadrakitavo Yantu Vishwata. Wherever noble thoughts come, we should get them. It's very important, therefore, that we should keep our educational system and our minds inclusive, receptive to new knowledge, not closed, not saying, no, this is how we know everything, now we are not prepared to learn anything else. That has never been our approach. Our approach has always been, give us Vidya. Vidya Dev. So that is the first pillar of learning to know, which is the Jnana Yoga. The second pillar of learning is learning to do. Kartavyam karma. What is the karma? The Jnana Yoga is all right. What about the Karma Yoga? If you simply learn and you don't learn anything to do, then your learning is not applicable. So, this, again, in our heritage, we have the Kurvanne viha karmani, jivishet shatam samaha, imam toi nanyate tosti, na karma lipyate nare. The Ishavasya Upanishad. The first Upanishad is the Vairagya Yoga, but the second line is this Karma Yoga. Work here for 100 years. Don't shirk your work. Don't wait for something in the afterlife. Yahi tumhe karna. Whatever you have to achieve spiritually or materially, you have to achieve on this earth in this life. And therefore, the importance of doing something creatively. And that is one of the weaknesses of our system. You know, we turn out lakhs, if not crores, of graduates every year, but they don't have any skills. So they become unemployed and ultimately become unemployable. It's a tragedy. Young lives are wasted because they have not been given requisite skills. I have been advocating for 40 years that between the school and between the higher institutions, we must have thousands of ITIs where people are taught certain skills. You see, the idea ITIs are looked down upon and they're not given any importance is wrong. It doesn't matter what you are doing. You could be a mantri or something. You could be a great political skills coming, but you learn to do something. So the Gita particularly is very, very strong on learning to do. And but remember, not only just learning to do something mechanically, but the way in which you work.
Sir, we are not able to hear you. You got muted. Can someone unmute him?
Can the host unmute Karan Singh ji?
Please. Shreya, can you do that? He got muted.
I
Shreya,
Uh,
please unmute Dr. Karan Singh. Shreya.
Sir, actually, I guess Sir has muted himself, so we have sent the
Okay.
request to unmute.
Sir, you have to unmute, sir. Sir, we are not able to hear you.
Oh,
Yeah, it got muted by mistake.
why did it? By who? I didn't mute it.
No, somehow automatically. Sorry, this
I mean,
new. We have to
you're,
learn new technologies. I am sorry. Go ahead, sir. Now you can go ahead.
you're an IIT and you can't run a proper seminar, webinar. What is this? I didn't even touch the machine, so don't blame me for muting myself. I never mute myself. I love to hear myself speak. Now, you've broken all my train of thought now. And did you hear what I said about learning to know first, the first pillar of learning? You've heard that.
Yes,
Now, the
except in the
second
last
pillar
30
is,
seconds.
all right, well, learning to know is more or less the Jnana Yoga I explained to you. The second pillar is learning to do. That is the Karma Yoga. Purvani viha karmani didi vishet shatam samaha. Evam tvai nan tosti na karma lipyate nare. Ishavasya Upanishad verse 2 exhorts us we must work here for 100 years. Because what we have to achieve here and now in this life and in this world. And therefore, work is being, at one stage, it was thought that spirituality meant only going off into an ashram. Not so. Our Upanishads and the Gita teaches us that learning to do is an essential requirement of life. And that is why I have for 40 years been saying that between the high school and the higher education, you must have thousands of ITIs to teach skills. Now they're talking about skill development. Unless you build that into your educational system, it won't work. We tried the three streams. Some elderly people may remember they failed in the +2. So what you've got to do is you've got to have thousands of ITIs so that people can go through and learn something. It doesn't matter whether you're a minister or whether you're a mantri or santri. You must learn to do something. And many people have started with very simple work. It doesn't mean that scientists are born as scientists. They work from the beginning, they work themselves up. And therefore it's important. But one thing our heritage has said, apart from learning to do, what is the attitude of your doing? That is important. I'll give you an example. Raja Chola built probably the greatest temple in India, the Brihadeeswara temple in Tanjavur. And one day he went out to inspect the work. He went to the first man who was cutting stone. He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Sir, I'm cutting stone." He went to the second man who was doing the same thing. He said, "What are you doing?" "Sir, I'm earning a living." He went to the third man doing the same thing. "What are you doing?" He said, "Sir, I'm building a great temple." You see the difference of attitude. The first one was Rajasic, just mechanically cutting. The second one at least was trying to earn some living for his family. The third one had the vision of the great temple. So when young people work today, you must have the vision of the great temple of India before you. You're building a great temple, the greatest democracy in the world, the greatest culture in the world, the oldest culture in the world, the richest culture in the world. You're building that temple. So don't build it in slipshod manner. Your work must be shuchir, daksha, as the Gita says. It must be accurate, it must be efficient, not inefficient work, sloppy work, shoddy work, chalta hai work. That is not enough. Therefore, learning to do, you must learn as much as you can. And keep your mind open. And one of the ways of learning, let me tell you, is to ask questions. As I said, ours is a dialogic civilization. You learn by asking questions. That's how you learn. So therefore, ask as many questions as you can, learn as much as you can, but always keep a positive image before you when you work. That will help you throughout your life. Whatever you're doing, you may end up as being a scientist, you may end your life as being just some, pretty ordinary profession. That doesn't matter. What matters is the texture of your inner consciousness. So that I think is very important in the Indian heritage. So learning to know is the Jnana Yoga. Learning to do is the Karma Yoga. And Karma Yoga is tremendously important because without Karma Yoga, we will not be able to build the India of our dreams. Now, the third pillar of learning to live together. Tremendously important. We are living in a diverse world. So many different cultures, different religions, different castes, different communities. Unless we learn to live together, Sahanavavatu, Sahanavabhunaptu, Sahaviryam Karvavahe, Tejasvinavadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahe. Maybe work together, maybe achieve together, maybe triumph together. May there be no hatred between us. Ma Vidvishavahe. The problem is that hatred is beginning to grow again in our country. That's not good. Whether it is on the basis of religion or on the basis of caste or on the basis of creed or any other basis. We must remember that our heritage tells us that every human being is divine. Ishvara sarvabhutanam hriddeshe tishtati. And that is why the atrocities of the caste system can no longer be accepted. How can you have a Vedanta which says that every human being is divine, and then you have a structure whereby you look down upon people because they happen to be born in a certain community? The caste system is a disgrace and an insult to the Vedanta. And particularly the way that over the centuries we've treated people who are known as outcasts or Dalits or Harijans. That is not part of our heritage. We must accept everybody as potentially divine. We are the only civilization which says, Ishvara sarvabhutanam hrideshati. Not only in my religion. I'm a Hindu, therefore Hindus are the only ones in which the divine resides and not in the others. It's not true. I come from a Muslim majority state. If the divine is in every human being, then every human being must be cherished, must be addressed properly. And therefore, this idea that learning to live together is of the essence. Because without learning to live together, we are going to destroy ourselves. And in our country particularly, we must be particularly careful about this. So learning to live together involves also a number of value systems. I don't have the time this evening to go into all the various value systems that I have identified. Family values. If there's constant kitch and tension within the family, it adversely affects the children also. You've got to learn family values. Children have to learn to respect the parents, but the parents have also got to learn to respect the children. Indian parents are too possessive. As I think Khalil Gibran says, our children come through us, but they don't belong to us. Every individual comes with his or her own karmic background or whatever however you want to put it, neurological background. And so every person is unique. Therefore, we mustn't be too possessive. But the children must learn to respect the adults also. And the grandparents, I'm now a grandparent. And by God's grace will be a great grandfather maybe soon. So there are these generations we've got to always. Then the man-woman relationship in the family. We reject the old system of the woman walking 3 paces behind the man, but we also reject the curious Western system of the woman walking 3 paces in front. That's equally ridiculous. It must be side by side. Ardhamini, they're half and half, they're half of humanity. They've got to be co-workers in the great task of our human development. Women are not to be relegated in any way. And therefore, in family values also, sexual values now, that obnoxious Article 377 at last has gone, which was a disgrace to have that on our books for so many centuries. The amount of pain that has caused, as the Supreme Court said, we owe an apology to to that community for all the atrocities committed on them. So we must be open now. We must be free. Sex is something beautiful if it is properly used, and therefore the family values must be there. Societal values, simple values like, for example, cleanliness, keeping your room and your institution clean, punctuality, simple things. But in India, there's no punctuality. I remember when I came to Delhi first, there was a function. I went there at the time on the card. Neither the organizers nor the audience was there. I left a card and came. I am notorious in Delhi that if you call Karan Singh, वो समय पे वक्त पे आ जाएंगे. बताओ, it's a normal courtesy we should have, but we have to teach our people punctuality. We have to teach our people helpfulness. In India, we drag people down who are weak. We look down upon people who are weak. That is not our cultural heritage. Our heritage is to help those who are weak. That is what I worship Lord Shiva Karpuru Karuna Avataram, the incarnation of compassion. We have no compassion left in this country. Where is the springs of compassion gone? We have nothing but anger and hatred. That is not good. So, societal values, let me simply say to you that if you take the fundamental duties, I don't want to embarrass you. How many people who are listening to me today now know that there is a section of fundamental duties in the Constitution? I don't think very many of you will know. Although you're all at IITs. Have you read the fundamental duties? Everybody talks about fundamental rights. Fundamental duties padhe hain aapne? Have you any idea that there is a section on? I know because I was on the drafting committee of the fundamental duties. There are 10 fundamental duties in Part 4 of the Constitution. I suggest that every institution would frame them and put them up in their classrooms. If you read these fundamental duties, if you follow them, you have learned your societal values. So their family values, their societal values, their interfaith values. I've been involved in the interfaith movement for many years. Swami Vivekananda started it in 1893 in Chicago, the first parliament of the world's religions. We've been carrying on that tradition. Rig Veda has a very important saying, Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahudha Vadanti. The truth is one, the wise call it by many names. We accept multiple paths to the divine. Remember that. That is uniqueness of Hinduism is we accept multiple paths to the divine, and our constitution does the same. Our constitution prohibits any type of indignities or unfairness on the basis of religion. So this is our heritage. We have talked of Indian heritage. Ekam Sat Vipra Bhahuda Veda. We must learn about others. We try to bring together people in a harmonious dialogue. Every university or IIT should have a small club where you can discuss interfaith values. Not to decide which faith is superior or not, but to try and understand. As I told you, I come from a Muslim majority state where we worship at our temples. I used also to go to Charar-e-Sharif, to Makhdoom Sahib, to Baba Rishi, to the great Sufi shrines. The largest Muslim shrine outside of Makkah and Medina is the Dargah of Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti, Gharib Nawaz, in Ajmer. Millions of people go there, regardless of their religion. Therefore, we've got to understand religious values, interfaith values. We've got to learn interfaith values. Unfortunately, we can't teach religion in our schools because Constitution forbids it. But that doesn't mean that we can't teach interfaith values, the values of humanity, the values of friendliness, the values of helpfulness, the values of assisting the weak. Those we can teach those values surely. Unfortunately, we've thrown the baby out along with the bathwater, along with religious teaching. We've thrown out all our value systems. So there used to be at one stage, we used to have some at least catechisms or some moral education, all of stuff. That's all disappeared. So remember that interfaith values. I've talked of values now. Family values, societal values, interfaith values, environmental values. Global warming is now not something in the future, is upon us. We are living through it every day. The glaciers are melting, the oceans are rising. Half a dozen countries are going to disappear within a couple of decades. Millions of species have become extinct. Our biodiversity is under grave threat. The climate is warming, and if we warm another 1 degree, we are finished. So by our mistreatment of nature, we have brought the calamity of global warming upon ourselves. And therefore, we ourselves have to fix that. We must teach environmental values. Our heritage, you talk about heritage, Atharva Veda. Look at the Bhumi Suktam in the Atharva Veda. The great poem, verses on hymn to the earth. 63 verses which contain the most holistic statement of environmental values anywhere in the world. That is our heritage. Because when we talk of our heritage, we must talk of the best in our heritage. And so even in environmental values, we can learn a lot from our own heritage. Read that Atharva Veda, Bhumi Suktam, all of those who are interested, and quote it all the time. I quoted it around the world. So finally, family values, societal values, interfaith values, environmental values, finally values for a global society. You must remember, we are proud to be Indians. We are proud Indians, but also let us not forget, we are also citizens of planet Earth. One small planet. Have any of you seen that NASA photograph of the Earth from outer space? A tiny speck of life and light against the unending vastnesses of outer space. So beautiful and yet so fragile. That is our Earth. That is Bhavani Vasundhara. That has nurtured our consciousness up from the slime of the primeval ocean 2 billion years ago to where we are today. We have despoiled that Earth. We have destroyed that Earth. And therefore, we've got to remember that we are citizens of a country, but we are also citizens of planet Earth. We should be proud to be global citizens. And therefore, we have a debt not only to ourselves, but to the entire of humanity. We've never confined our philosophy only to India or only to one religion. It's for the entire world. And therefore, all these values that I've talked about, these are important in the third pillar of learning, which is learning to live together. I spoke of learning to know, the Jnana Yoga, learning to do, the Karma Yoga, learning to live together, the Sahaja Yoga. And you know what the fourth pillar is? Learning to be. Our UNESCO Commission, we brought out the fourth pillar, learning to be. Do we know who we are? Have we looked within ourselves? Or are we only looking outwards? Our inner journey is no less important than the outer journey, remember that. Our inner life is no less important than the outer life. We must know who we are. We must know that at the core of our being, there is the light. Hirnamaya pare koshe dhrijam brahma nishkalam tad shubhram jyotisham jyoti sasatatma vido vido. Within the furthest golden sheath resides the immutable Brahman. That resplendent light of lights, that is what the knowers of the Atman know. The inner light. The light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world, as the Bible says. the Noor-e-Ruhani of the Sufis, the Ek Onkar of the Sikhs, inner light. What does Allama Iqbal say, the great Urdu poet? खुद ही को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे बता तेरी रजा क्या. Raise your conscience to such a level that before taking any decision, God will consult you. What is your view? Look at the idea, the growth of inner consciousness. That is important. Therefore, please, as you go through life, you IITians, you may be very good in your thermodynamics or whatever strange sciences you are studying. I know nothing about it. I'm a humanities man, a philosophy man. But never forget the inner life. Andar jhaako, look within. Do some meditation. Do some yoga. Do some ibadat. Do some pranayama. Do something. Try and see what is it within you. So that when you end your life, you can say along with the rishis, Vedaham etam purusham mahantam aditya parvam tapasapa. I have seen that great being shining like 1,000 suns beyond me. So that is my lecture on the heritage. I haven't even started on the poetry yet. How long have we had done? Shreya, time.
I think about 30 minutes.
Yes.
I spoke 30 minutes. I spoke it as Dr. Radhakrishnan ne kaha 30 minutes follow. I spoke it on my subject. Now you brought it and let me say something about the poetry. I love poetry. I love poetry. And you see, what role has poetry emphasis played in the past? Now, what can I say? The Vedas are poetry, the Upanishads are poetry, the epics are poetry. But I'll come to something little more. Gandhiji was greatly influenced by a bhajan, like Narsi Mehta. You remember? Vaishnava Jana to tope kahiye je, peed parai jane. Those sort of poems gave a great impetus to the father of the nation, to Mahatma Das. Tulsidas, Ramcharitmanas, perhaps the greatest single poem written. When our indentured laborers went around the world, Mauritius, Fiji, Guyana, Suriname, everywhere, they took only one book, the Ramcharitmanas. For them, that was Ved, that was Upanishad, that was epic, everything. And that book has influenced billions of people. I don't want to quote, so if I start quoting, I'll go on all night. So I'm going to restrain myself from quoting from Tulsidas. Then, Allama Iqbal again. सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तां हमारा हम बुलबुलें हैं इसकी ये गुलस्तां हमारा मजहब नहीं सिखाता आपस में बैर रखना हिंदी है हम वतन है हिंदुस्तान है. Allama Iqbal may be Pakistan's national poet, but he wrote this poem for India. यूनान मिस्र रूमी सब मिट गए जहां से बाकी है लेकिन अभी नामो निशान हमारा कुछ बात है कि हस्ती मिट्टी नहीं हमारी सदियों रहा है दुश्मन दौरे जमा हमारा सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा. This poem, we still sing it at the Congress meetings very often and in many other. It's written by a Muslim, written by a Pakistani. Or he became a Pakistani, he wasn't a Pakistani. He's always lived and died in India. But whatever, poetry. Then in Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's Anand Math, the great poem Vande Mataram, which has become our national song, that energized lakhs of people. In the 1905 partition of Bengal agitation, that was the first massive agitation in India. The rallying cry was Vande Mataram. People went to the gallows saying Vande Mataram. Bhagat Singh went to the gallows saying Vande Mataram. That one mantra, Vande Mataram, from that great song in Ananda Math, that has influenced people. So this is how poetry has influenced our lives. And let me come a little closer to the modern times. Bismil Azimabadi, सरफरोशी की तमन्ना अब हमारे दिल में है देखना है जोर कितना बाजू है कातिल में. आप तो हैदराबादी हैं आपको तो उर्दू आनी चाहिए. सरफरोशी की तमन्ना अब हमारे दिल में है, देखना है जोर कितना बाजुए कातिल में है. This poem was a great influencer in the early days of the national movement, when people were prepared to give up their lives for India. And then Gandhiji, of course, Ram Dhun is one thing. Raghupati Raghav Raja Ram, that is an old thing, but he used that in all his meetings. And then there's a lovely song, if you remember, by Sahir Ludhianvi, Allah Tero Naam, Ishwara Tero Naam, Sabko Sarmati De Bhagwan. The film में भी आई थी ये गाना. So what I'm trying to say is these songs have had a tremendous influence. You talk about poetry's influence. Poetry has a tremendous influence because poetry appeals not to the mind, poetry appeals to the heart. Literature appeals to the mind, poetry appeals to the heart. That's where music is important. That's why dance is important. Because Bharatanatyam is the greatest dance in the world. The Tandava of Lord Shiva, Natanam Adinar. What a dance! I mean, that one dance is enough to put one into a trance. You can learn more about Hinduism with one Bharatanatyam performance than you can by reading 20 books. But that is come alive. The goddess comes alive. Nataraja comes alive. Vishnu comes alive. Rama comes alive. Krishna comes alive. Ganesha comes alive. Hanuman. They come alive. That is the creativity of art. Therefore, I leave you with these ideas. Please think of the richness of our heritage. Anything you mention, we can find something. I'm not saying that we have all the Vidya in the world. I'm not saying go back to some, it's not a revanchist idea. It is that we should at least gain whatever we can from our past in order to use it for our future. Now, what is our future? A bright and integrated, a harmonious and a peaceful India in a peaceful world. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful talk. So we will proceed forward. Now I will open the floor for questions. If you have any question for sir, please post it on chat and I will read it out for everyone. As of now, I will begin with some question that we already received from students. So Vakif from MA first year asks, can India preserve its diversity of cultural heritage and practices and tradition in its path to become a world superpower? Sir, your thoughts?
Well, I think we must preserve the best of our customs, and we cannot preserve all the customs because the world is changing very rapidly. We are moving into the digital age, as it were, and many of the old traditions are gradually dropping away. Maybe some of them must drop away. We can't hang on to old traditions, but whatever is best in our culture, we should retain that. We shouldn't give that up just because we feel that we are becoming modern. And becoming a world power, it will help us if we get the best in our heritage. It will not hinder us. That would be my reply.
Okay, sir. The next question is, why hasn't any other form of Indian poetry matched the level of impact of Ramayana and Mahabharata that is left on Indian culture?
Sorry, but that who is left?
Sorry, why hasn't any other form of Indian poetry matched the level of impact of Ramayana and Mahabharata on Indian culture?
Well, I told you, Ramayana is Mahabharata are unique because they're huge epics and they've been going on for thousands of years. But a lot of this modern poetry that I mentioned to you also had a big impact. Had a big impact also. It's not a question of comparison. You can't really compare those huge epics with modern poetry. But I've given enough examples, I think, to show that even contemporary poets and modern poets also have had their influence upon our actions, upon our behavior, and upon our consciousness.
Okay, sir. Uh, any other question? So next question would be, what is your favorite genre in poetry?
My favorite genre in poetry,
Yes, sir.
I think the Urdu ghazal is difficult to beat.
Mm.
Urdu ghazal is very difficult because what the Urdu poet can say in one shade, you could write a book about. I think that is my favorite genre. I love English poetry, mind you. I can recite English poetry ad infinitum all night if you like. My favorite poets are Yeats and Frost and Dylan Thomas. But the genre, if you talk of a genre, I think the Urdu ghazal is supreme.
Okay, so what would be your favorite Navrasa? Like
Favorite?
poet Navrasa?
Navarasa. Which favorite rasa would I like?
Yeah, in poetry.
Well, I am somebody who loves all the rasas because you need somebody also to appreciate the rasas. The 9 rasas are all there. I know them all. And I think my favorite, if I have to choose a rasa, it would be the Shanta rasa, the one at the end.
Very nice. So one of the question was, uh, thank you. So one of the question was, so let me see, sir. Sorry. Can you brief us about evolution of poems for expression of love, like in Shringar Ras or something?
Sorry, please repeat that.
Can you brief us about the evolution of poems for expression of love?
Well, poem, love is the supreme rasa of poetry. Most of the poetry is about love. Shelley, I can give not what men call love, but wilt thou accept not? The worship the heart lifts above and the heavens reject not. The desire of the moth for the star, of the night for the morrow, the devotion to something afar from the sphere of our soul. And what is love? Love is everything. मोहब्बत में नहीं है फर्क जीने और मरने का उसी को देख के जीते हैं जिसका दम निकले तख्त क्या चीज है और लाल जवाहर क्या है इश्क वाले तो खुदाई भी लुटा दे there's so many things can be said about love. You cannot, love is whatever love it may be, but love is a supreme rasa of consciousness. Love for God, love for man, love for woman, love between men, whatever you like, whatever love it is, love is there. Supreme.
Sir, one of our volunteers have asked whether can you recite some of your poems. It will be pleasure to hear your oration of.
No, on principle, I never recite my own poems. Sorry. I recite other people's poems. I never recite my own poems. You have to read them in my book or get somebody else to recite.
Okay, one other, Sony D. Prajapati has said, thank you very much for your wonderful talk, sir. We all need your thought on for betterment of life.
For betterment
Life.
of life.
Yes, sir.
Well, what I've talked about is more or less about the betterment of all these values. If you accept these values, they will improve life. The whole of my speech is involved around the betterment and enrichment of human consciousness. So, Murthy, you don't have any questions?
Sir, I wanted the students to ask.
I'm joking.
Yeah, I mean, this is a wonderful time that I had in recent times. I can say that
Yes.
I'm able to
We've had so
because
much,
you have
so
put
much.
everything in a nutshell what life is all about. And as you were talking about love, I always say I read a lot of things about yoga. They say the end of yoga is love. Okay, love for everyone, and unconditional love. Most of our love is conditional. Okay, so I think that's what you talked about it when you say live, for others. Integrated, integral way of living that you are talking about. The third vertical you mentioned about. This is an amazing concept. Thank you, sir.
I
I
enjoyed
always
this.
tell people,
Yes.
one can grow on their own. I mean, cancer is also a growth, but we don't want cancer. Okay, so when you grow, you should grow together with everyone around you. That is a true growth. Otherwise, the growth has no meaning. Okay, thank you,
That is
sir.
what institutions are for, institutional growth.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so as of now, I can't see any questions. So let's conclude. Thank you, sir, on the behalf of SpeakMaker IIT Hyderabad and
Thank you.
fellow poetry enthusiasts present virtually here. Today, I would like to extend a heartfelt thanks to Dr. Karan Singh ji. Sir, you made time fly for us this evening. Your excellent oratory and informative conversation held us captive today. Thank you so much for this experience.
Thank you, sir. Really,
I would
it
like
was.
to thank our director, faculty mentors, and administrative staff for their help and support. I would also like to thank Shri Usha Ravichandran ji, Ona Lakshmi ji, Nalin ji, and Hima Bindu Didi for their help and motivation. Special thanks to our cultural secretary and team of Irshad and all our hardworking student volunteers for their uh, successful for this event. Thank you, sir.
I love the
Thank you,
little.
sir. Thanks for a memorable evening, sir. Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it myself. I've
Yes,
enjoyed it.
thank you, sir.
After
Thank you,
all
sir.
the film
We would
years,
like you to come sometime, sir, when this whole pandemic is over. That would be
got,
wonderful. Spend a day with us,
got
and that would be really a great.
very happy new year to you. After the very dumb and dull last year, I hope you have a happy new year.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, and to you also. Okay, we wish you great, good health in the new
By
year.
God's grace, I will be 90 on my next birthday in March.
So,
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful.
Lord Shiva's grace.
No, sir. We pray God to give you many more years of life so that you can transmit that wisdom to all of us. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
See you, friends. Thank you very much to all of you who have organized this. Thank you, Shivaji. Thanks to everyone. Thank you, Shreya, and
thank
everyone who is there. Thank you.